In a small village among the rolling hills of West Africa, there lived a 70-year-old man named Baba Kwame. He was a tall, strong figure, with deep lines etched into his ebony skin like the roots of the ancient baobab tree in the village square. Baba Kwame was known for his wisdom, his calm presence, and above all, his secret unwavering love for his 15-year-old granddaughter, Oma. Oma had come into his care after tragedy struck. Her parents, Kwame's only son and daughter-in-law, had died in a flood that swept through their neighboring village years ago. Baba Kwame, who had already buried his wife decades earlier, had taken Oma in without hesitation. She was just a little girl then, her small hands clinging to him as though he were the only steady thing in her collapsing world. Since that day, he vowed to protect her with everything he had left. Oma was now blossoming into a young woman, her beauty and intelligence capturing the attention of everyone in the village. Boys who once teased her for running barefoot now followed her with shy smiles, offering gifts of fruits or handmade trinkets. To Baba Kwame, these boys were like predators circling the most precious part of his life. He didn't trust them, not one of them. "You are like the moon," he would tell her as they sat under the baobab tree in the evenings. "Bright and beautiful, but surrounded by darkness. I will make sure that darkness never touches you." Oma would laugh and roll her eyes. "Grandfather, you worry too much. Not all the boys are bad. They don't need to be bad to bring harm," he'd reply, his voice heavy with experience. Baba Kwame's protectiveness wasn't just about the boys. It was about the world, the dangers he had seen in his long life. He had grown up watching young girls in the village married off too soon, losing their dreams and sometimes their lives. He had seen the pain in their eyes, the light dimmed too early. He refused to let that happen to Oma. But as Oma grew older, his vigilance began to weigh on her. She wanted to go to the market alone, to visit friends without him shadowing her, to speak to the boys who approached her without Baba's stern glare chasing them away. "Grandfather," she said one day, "I can take care of myself. You have to trust me." Kwame's heart ached at her words. "Oma," he said gently, "you are my blood. My heart walks outside my body when you are out there. How can I trust the world not to harm my heart?" Oma didn't reply. She knew his love for her was deep, but it felt like a chain when all she wanted was freedom. One day, a boy named Kojo came to their home. Kojo was 17, respectful and polite. He had been raised well and wanted to court Oma. Baba Kwame watched him with narrowed eyes as Kojo greeted him, bowing slightly as tradition dictated. "Baba, I want to speak with you," Kojo said. Kwame's eyes darkened. "What does a boy like you have to say to an old man like me?" Kojo's voice trembled but didn't falter. "I want to walk with Oma to the festival next week. I promise to protect her as you would." Kwame's chest tightened. The audacity of this boy, thinking he could take on the role of protector. But Oma, who was listening from the corner, stepped forward. "Grandfather, please. Let me go. Kojo is kind, and I'll be safe." Kwame said nothing at first. The silence stretched, heavy and uncomfortable. Finally, he spoke. "We will see." That night, Kwame sat alone, staring at the stars. The memories came unbidden: his wife, who had been his light, his son, who had filled him with pride, the flood that had taken everything from him except Oma. Each loss was a crack in his heart, and he feared the next would shatter him completely. The day of the festival arrived, and Kwame reluctantly allowed Oma to live with Kojo. But his heart wouldn't rest. He followed them at a distance, his old legs carrying him through the bustling crowd. He saw Oma laughing, her face glowing with joy, and for a moment, he hesitated. Perhaps she was right. Perhaps the world wasn't as dangerous as he believed. But then, as the sun began to set, he lost sight of her. Panic seized him. He pushed through the crowd, calling her name. His voice, usually so steady, was filled with desperation. Finally, he found her by the riverbank, sitting with Kojo. She was safe, but the sight of her in such a vulnerable place made his knees weak. "Oma," he called, his voice trembling. She looked up, startled. "Grandfather, what are you doing here?" Kwame didn't answer. His chest heaved as he tried to steady himself. "You cannot stay here. The river, it took your parents. It will take you too." Oma stood and walked to him, placing her hands on his shoulders. "Grandfather," she said softly, "I'm not going anywhere. I'm here. Safe. You have to let me live." Kwame's vision blurred with tears. He realized then that his love for her had turned into a fear that chained them both. He had to let her grow, even if it meant loosening his grip. "I will try," he said finally. "But you must promise me one thing." "What is that?" she asked. "Never forget where you come from. Never forget who loves you." Oma nodded, tears in her own eyes. "I could never forget." From that day, Baba Kwame tried to step back, though it wasn't easy. He still watched from the shadows, still worried when she was out of sight. But he also saw her strength, her kindness, her ability to navigate the world in ways he hadn't imagined. He knew he wouldn't be around forever, but as long as he lived, he would be her baobab tree, deeply rooted, unyielding, and always there to shelter her when the storms came.